Max Verstappen's words about Christian Horner landed inside Red Bull like a shockwave because they cut straight through months of controlled messaging, corporate explanations, and carefully managed silence. At a time when the team has been desperate to present Horner's dismissal as a clean reset, Verstappen did the opposite. He humanized it, personalized it, and in doing so exposed just how deep the emotional and competitive bond between driver and team principal really was. This was not a vague gesture of respect or a polite acknowledgement of past success. Verstappen spoke with clarity and conviction about what Horner meant to him personally, making it impossible to frame Horner's exit as a purely technical or strategic decision without consequences. Four-time world champion says someone went through fire for me. That statement carries weight far beyond sentiment. It is an admission of loyalty forged under pressure, not comfort. Horner's role in Verstappen's career cannot be separated from Red Bull's modern identity. From the moment Verstappen was promoted to the senior team in 2016, Horner became his most vocal internal supporter. At a time when Verstappen's aggressive style divided opinion, Horner repeatedly defended him against critics, rivals, and even skeptics within the paddock. That trust created an environment where Verstappen could push limits without fear of being abandoned at the first mistake. Those foundations became critical during the most intense period of Red Bull's recent history. The 2021 title fight was not just a sporting contest, but a psychological siege that demanded unwavering belief from everyone involved. Horner absorbed pressure relentlessly, shielding Verstappen from internal battles, steward controversies, and media storms. Verstappen's comments make clear that he has never forgotten who stood beside him when the stakes were highest. What truly stunned many within the paddock was not the praise itself, but the revelation that the relationship never faded after Horner's dismissal. Verstappen did not distance himself, nor did he quietly move on. Instead, he revealed that they remain in contact every single race weekend, exchanging messages throughout Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, even months after Horner left Red Bull. That level of continued communication is extraordinary in Formula One, especially following such a dramatic leadership change. It suggests that Horner's influence over Verstappen did not end with his job title. While he no longer directs strategy or personnel, he remains a trusted voice, offering belief, encouragement, and perspective during race weekends. From Red Bull's perspective, this is deeply uncomfortable. The team wants to project unity under its new leadership to signal that the past chapter is closed. Verstappen's openness makes that impossible. It reminds everyone that Horner was not just a manager, but a central figure in the emotional ecosystem that powered Red Bull's success. Verstappen did not deny that Horner's departure came during a difficult period. He acknowledged that results were poor, that unrest existed inside the team, and that shareholders had lost patience. His honesty here matters because it shows he understands the business reality of Formula One. But understanding a decision does not erase its emotional cost, and Verstappen made that distinction very clear. He spoke openly about how difficult it was to accept Horner's exit after achieving so much together. Titles, defining races, and shared adversity are not easily compartmentalized. In elite sport, those experiences create bonds that outlast contracts and organizational charts. Verstappen's reflections expose that truth in a way Red Bull could not control. At the same time, Verstappen was careful not to undermine the current leadership. He acknowledged that the atmosphere within Red Bull has improved since Laurent Mekies took over. He described a team that feels lighter, more positive, and more cohesive, suggesting that the internal tension which had built up under Horner's final months has eased. Crucially, however, he did not frame this improvement as a rejection of Horner. Instead, he implied that circumstances, not character, led to the breakdown. The Red Bull style had been lost, not because Horner was incapable, but because prolonged pressure, poor results, and internal conflict had taken their toll. This nuance is important. Verstappen refused to rewrite history to justify the present. He gave Horner full credit for building the team that delivered championships and for assembling the people who made those victories possible. That kind of public loyalty from a reigning champion is rare, and it complicates any attempt to reduce Horner's exit to a simple failure narrative. There is also a deeper subtext to Verstappen's comments. His continued relationship with Horner suggests that trust for him is personal rather than institutional. He believes in people more than structures, and that belief does not automatically transfer when leadership changes. Red Bull may have stabilized operationally, but emotional continuity is far harder to replicate. This matters because Verstappen's long-term future has never been purely contractual. His commitment to Red Bull has always been rooted in belief that the team understands him, supports him, and shares his competitive mindset. Horner embodied that alignment for nearly a decade, and losing him was not just a managerial change, but a rupture in that trust network. The context of Horner's final years only amplifies this. His uneasy relationship with Jos Verstappen created visible fractures that spilled into the public domain. Max Verstappen was forced to navigate an incredibly delicate balance between family loyalty and professional respect, all while competing at the highest level. That he still speaks so positively about Horner despite that turbulence is telling. Verstappen's comments also challenge the assumption that leadership changes automatically deliver performance gains. While Red Bull did improve results after the summer break, winning multiple races, Verstappen stopped short of drawing direct causation. He recognized that Formula One is rarely that simple, and that performance swings often reflect broader structural and technical factors rather than a single decision. By choosing his words with such precision, Verstappen managed to walk a line that very few drivers in modern Formula One are capable of navigating. He did not defend Horner blindly, nor did he undermine the authority of the current Red Bull leadership. Instead, he acknowledged that multiple truths can coexist at the same time. Horner's era brought unprecedented success, that his departure was driven by genuine unrest and disappointing results, and that the team is now attempting to rediscover its identity under new management. That level of emotional intelligence is rare in a sport that usually rewards silence over nuance, and it is exactly why his comments carried such impact. For Red Bull's shareholders and senior executives, this creates an uncomfortable but unavoidable tension. Verstappen is not just another employee or even just a star driver. He is the cornerstone of the entire project. He publicly states that Horner remains a significant emotional reference point in his career. It subtly exposes how much of Red Bull's dominance was built on personal trust rather than purely institutional strength. That does not diminish Laurent Mekies' leadership, but it does underline how delicate continuity can be when success has historically flowed through individuals rather than rigid systems. This also forces Red Bull to confront a deeper question about its own evolution. Moving forward operationally is one thing, but replacing the emotional glue that held a team together during its most intense battles is far more complex. Verstappen's remarks suggest that while structures can change quickly, relationships leave a much longer shadow. In an environment as competitive and pressurized as Formula One, those shadows can influence motivation, belief, and resilience in ways that are impossible to quantify on a balance sheet. Across the paddock, Verstappen's words have reignited serious discussion about Christian Horner's standing in the sport. When a four-time world champion openly credits a former team principal for standing by him through the hardest moments of his career, it reframes Horner not as a fallen figure, but as a proven leader whose influence still carries weight. In Formula One, reputations rarely survive abrupt dismissals intact, yet Verstappen's testimony reinforces the idea that Horner's legacy is not defined by how his tenure ended, but by what it achieved. That naturally fuels fuels speculation about Horner's future. Influence in Formula One is not limited to job titles, and Verstappen's continued contact with him highlights how authority can persist long after formal power has been removed. Teams, investors, and rival figures will all take note of the respect Horner still commands from one of the most valuable drivers in the sport. That respect alone keeps doors open, regardless of current circumstances. What ultimately elevates Verstappen's statement beyond routine post-season reflection is its authenticity. In a sport increasingly dominated by rehearsed answers, legal caution, and brand protection, he chose to speak in human terms. He talked about loyalty, shared hardship, emotional bonds, and the difficulty of watching a defining figure exit the stage. In doing so, he reminded everyone that Formula One, for all its data and technology, is still driven by people under extraordinary pressure. Red Bull may be moving forward in terms of structure, atmosphere, and day-to-day operations, but Verstappen's words ensure that Horner's presence remains part of the team's story, not as a destabilizing force, but as a reference point for what once worked, what was lost, and what cannot simply be replicated overnight. That lingering presence is not a threat, but it is a reality that Red Bull must now manage carefully. This is why Verstappen's comments stunned the team more than any controversy ever could. They were not provocative, defiant, or inflammatory. They were honest. And in Formula One, where narratives are often engineered as carefully as cars, honesty can be far more disruptive than criticism, because when the sport strips away spin and talking points, authenticity has a way of reshaping perception. In a paddock where perception often becomes reality, Verstappen's words may echo far longer than any official statement ever will.